This meeting is being recorded.
I think we can go ahead and start. It's already 5 minutes past. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening from wherever you're joining in. Thank you for attending this webinar. We hope you find it engaging and insightful. At first, we will start with introducing the discussants who will be speaking during the webinar. So our first discussant is Engineer Chibueze Eke. Chibueze Eke is the CEO of Sea Solar Energy Limited, a forward-leading solar energy company situated in Abuja. Chibueze holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Operations Research and Industrial Engineering from Cornell University in New York in the United States of America. He had his degree in engineering degree in engineering management, also at Cornell University, and an MSc with a distinction in energy finance from University of Dundee in Scotland. He commenced his career with Alcatel-Lucent in New Jersey in 2005 as an intern and was awarded a certificate of excellence by the divisional director. He then proceeded to Bank of America, Merrill Lynch in 2006 as an investment banking technology analyst intern, and subsequently joined Arcadia Solutions as a consultant. He became a managing consultant for energy market and regulatory consultants in Abuja, Nigeria in 2016. He started off as a senior consultant where he provided transaction advisory support to UK CDC, mini grid developers, local and international IPP investors, and then grew to the ranks of managing consultant. Chibueze is a member of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, as well as other corporate bodies. We also have with us today Mrs. Habiba Ali. Habiba has been in the renewable energy industry since 2005. She co-founded the Developmental Association for Renewable Energies and worked as national coordinator. She worked on the Clean Development Mechanism Project, Efficient Cook Stoves for Nigeria, the Solar Lamps Assembly and Sales Training Program, and the Solar Dryers for Healthy Food Project. Habiba branched out to handle the commercial aspects of the renewable energy industry by launching Society Renewable Energies, a social enterprise which offers efficient, reliable, and sustainable products, including solar lamps, solar home systems, and water filters for the people of the rural and peri-urban communities of northern Nigeria. Society also supports the building of capacity of women in rural northern Nigeria to their own businesses. Through their activities, Society has deployed over 25,000 solar solutions and over 60,000 improved cook stoves, and they are currently expanding their work in the mini-grid sector. Habiba, through Society, sits on the National Council of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. She is the country chairperson of the African Women in Energy and Power. She was the pioneer vice president of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria and a member of Clean Cooking Alliance, the Nigerian Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves, and the Netherlands Alumni Association of Nigeria, where she is a member of the board of trustees. She worked on the global team that implemented the Practitioners Dialogue on Climate Investment funded by GIZ, and she was on as an advisory member for a one-year period. She is also a member of the board of trustees at Mainstream Foundation. and also a member of the board of the Nigerian Advisory Board. She also sits on the board of several companies. We also have with us today Mrs. Amina Ahmed Ibrahim. Amina Ibrahim is a PhD candidate at the Center for Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy in the University of Dundee, in the United Kingdom. Her research focuses on risk, responsibility, and social value creation in energy infrastructure development. She is particularly interested in the intersections of energy justice, human rights, and sustainability, key issues for a socially equitable transition. Amina has an MSc in Management from the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. She holds a government position in Nigeria's sole Economic and Sector Reform Agency, the Bureau of Public Enterprises. And we have lastly with us Mr. Wilfred Okeke. Wilfred Okeke is a dynamic and resourceful professional with over 10 years of experience in research, planning, development, project management, and monitoring and evaluation. He has championed efforts targeted at environmental sustainability, climate action, and advocacy for clean energy transition. Wilfred holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Geography and Meteorology, as well as a master's degree in Environmental Management and Control. He works with GLOW Initiative for Economic Empowerment as a program manager, and he has also served as a program associate with the Africa Fellowship for Young Energy Leaders. Wilfred consults for international and local NGOs. We welcome all our speakers to this webinar, and we'll be moving on with the presentation from Electricity Line. And my name is Ivia Hamo. I'm the moderator for this event, and I'm also the founder of Electricity Line. I hope you have an insightful and engaging time with us today. Thank you very much. We'll be moving on to our presentation for today from Electricity Line before we open the discussion sessions with our esteemed panelists. I will just share my screen. Can you please, Electricity Line, please, can you share the screen and put up the presentation, please? Thank you. Okay, the theme of today's webinar is Renewable Energy Adoption in Communities, Bridging the Gap between Energy Transition Initiatives and Community Aspirations. The key question we'll be addressing today and our discussants will be focusing on is how renewable energy adoption can be promoted in communities to form part of their energy transition aspirations and also align with the global energy transition agenda. That's just a quote to emphasize the role of communities in the energy transition agenda, because communities have a role to play in the uptake of new technologies and how they engage with energy. But because they remain marginalized, the broader benefits of their meaningful participation has not really been taken advantage of. And that's why we put forward this webinar to promote and emphasize how communities can be better involved in the energy transition process. Next slide, please. So I believe we all know that the global economy is at a critical juncture because there's a need to move away from traditional fossil-based energy sources to renewable sources. And that has become more pressing with all the shifts that are going on, things relating to environmental concerns, rising temperatures, melting ice caps, and so there are so many issues ongoing globally. And as we know, even with the Russia and Ukraine war, that has also emphasized the need for increased energy security in various economies. And because of this shift in the global transition, if you go back, please, because of this shift, it has now become imperative. Go back, please, back to the previous slide. it has now become imperative for for us to engage with communities because while the energy transition and renewable energy adoption is increasing globally, what we're also seeing on the other end is that there's some form of disconnect with these communities in terms of, especially from the angle of equity and justice, which we'll be speaking to. And this is because of the demographic variances across the various regions and countries, both in the global north and also in the global south. And like I said, renewable energy is gaining worldwide adoption. The IEA has predicted that renewable energy is set to scale up to 35% by 2025. And even in the US, we can see that the drive for clean energy has fueled governments to increase their spending on renewables. And with the recent Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed in 2022, it is set or estimated to provide at least 370 billion in clean energy investment. So we can see that well, the shift is ongoing. But this is not to discredit or discountenance the role of traditional fossil fuels because there's always this debate with will renewable energy outpace fossil fuels. The truth is that for energy security purposes, we will likely continue to deploy fossil-based resources, but complemented with renewable energy. Next slide, please. And even from the next slide, we can see the IEA's projections from 2023 to 2025. You will see that renewables, which is the green bar, is set to increase over time. You can see that in 2021, which I believe was just post-COVID, all the various sources were deployed and utilized respectively. But you can see that there's a decline across fossil-based sources in comparison to renewables that are set to scale. Next slide, please. And like I said in the previous slide, solar PV is the most widely adopted and used form of renewable energy. And you can see even between 2008 to 2019, we see that these solar home systems, solar lights, solar resources were deployed and have been deployed significantly. Next slide, please. But bringing it back, while there's a positive shift towards renewables, we can see when we view it from the angle of social acceptability, which is what we're discussing today, particularly in community settings, you can say that the energy transition is somewhat skewed because a lot of contributing factors. They have things like redlining policies, structural segregation, and even with historical infrastructure located in near low-income communities, which has resulted in increased pollution, severe health risks, and of course, this has instigated fear and opposition from the affected communities. So while energy demand is set to rise, there needs to be a shift of the energy transition agenda from decarbonization of the supply side to also cut across the demand side. And this needs to take into account demographic and socio-economic variances so that no one is left behind. And there was a study conducted in California exploring the impact of these renewable energy technologies on demographic and socio-economic trends. And it revealed that there were lower levels of PV adoption in disadvantaged communities because of the impact of distributive and equity impact on most of these policies. I don't know, there's an echo. So even when these technologies are put in place, if the policy framework does not allow for the impactful influence on these communities, you see that even some of these states, or if the populations within the states are not privy to the benefits of some of these support policies, and in fact, they cannot capitalize on the advantages that come with it. So the bill saving advantages and even the associated benefits. So we can see that there is a possible variance and divide between energy transition initiatives and community aspirations, which if it's not properly balanced, will end up leaving a lot of people behind. Next slide. Thank you. So looking at it from just transition perspective, which Mrs. Amina Ibrahim will really go into, this is just an overview. You can see that there's a lot of talk around the energy transition and whether it is fair and just. And if you look at it from the perspective of energy justice, in terms of the different tenets to it, there's the recognition, restorative, distributive, and procedural. And that advocates that in terms of distributive justice, there should be fair allocation of resources amongst diverse community members so that the benefits and burdens are shared between members of the society and the community. And this also ties into the governance aspect, which deals with the procedural justice in terms of the fact that communities should be involved in the decision-making process of this energy transition journey. But even before you employ those distributive strategies, there needs to be a recognition of the past injustices that have been imposed. And that will then inform what sort of restorative measures and distributive strategies that will align with the aspirations of the community. Because let's not forget that communities also have their own social values, cultural heritage, some spiritual. So you have to really take into account all this when you are putting in place renewable energy technologies. And of course, recognizing that people have been systematically overlooked and marginalized in the energy transition process is also key. Next slide. So is one thing, so there needs to be inclusive strategies to endanger public acceptance, citizen participation, and control over decision making. Because the adoption of renewable energy technology is not just a simple, it's not a one size fits all. And I'm sure Mrs. Abiba and Engineer Chibueze will talk about their experiences as we go along in this webinar. So like I said, there are social, economic, and cultural factors that can influence the level of adoption of these technologies amongst the communities. So community engagement is key, socioeconomic analysis all play a role in promoting social acceptance. So the transition to renewable energy in communities is a complex undertaking and it requires a multifaceted approach, which will be discussed during the webinar. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So some of the recommendations which will be expanded on, of course, you need to build the trust of the communities you are involved in. There needs to be access to finance, policy drivers and incentives need to be in place. Capacity building is key. Gender mainstreaming and skills development so that you are also empowering the communities that you are involved in. There needs to be engagement of the community, local content and productive uses of energy, which I'm sure the panelists would also discuss on. Community energy initiatives that promote community engagement in the procedural aspect of most of these projects. Of course, you also have to engage in advocacy, awareness raising, information and knowledge sharing, and collaboration is really key so that these communities feel included in the process. And you need to also adopt what is called an ecosystems approach that looks at different facets of the energy transition process and embedding it into the aspirations of these communities. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the energy transition, as you know, we're still in the transition, but the transition has to be sensitive to various national and global dynamics of energy systems across the world. And there needs to be social acceptability. This is really key because without social acceptability, adoption of these technologies that drive the transition in community settings will be very difficult. So the social aspects are equally as important as the technology itself. Hence, the transition has to be equitable, fair, and just, starting from the grassroots over a bottom-up approach. To achieve the just transition, community aspirations must be recognized and developed alongside concerned communities through various policy tools and support mechanisms so that there is a fair distribution of the benefits and burdens of the energy transition without leaving anyone behind. Thank you very much. And from here, we will now move over to that, just provided an overview of what we'll be discussing today. We'll move over to the question and answer session. We'll start with Engineer Chibueze. Engineer Chibueze, AK. Engineer Chibueze, AK, please confirm that you can hear me before I move forward, please. Engineer Chibueze, I hope he's not having technical.
Hi everyone, hi Evie. Hi everyone.
Thank you for joining us. We'll start with some questions for you today. So just to give a background before we move forward, as has been said, renewable energy adoption, especially in Nigeria, is gaining significant momentum, driven by, you are muted, sorry, driven by initiatives like the Energy Transition Plan, which is designed to address energy poverty and foster economic growth. Of course, the Energy Transition Plan emphasizes the importance of financing to empower the adoption of renewable energy and promote impactful community engagement. There's a projected investment requirement of about 410 billion by 2060. And its plans to focus on various sectors like generation, transmission, distribution infrastructure, cooking, industry, transport, and of course, oil and gas decarbonization. Now, based on this background, how do you see the role of renewable energy evolving in the overall energy mix in Nigeria? And what opportunities do you foresee for further growth in the sector?
Thank you very much, Evie. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to really participate in these discussions. I see the renewable energy space playing a critical role. Despite the challenges, definitely a lot of opportunities lie ahead for us, particularly in the area of creating energy access for majority of Nigerians who, as we all know, about half of the population is living in communities where there has never really been access to electricity. So renewable energy is clean, it's modern, it's quick to deploy, and it's really going to be a game changer in reaching to those communities to provide access for first-time electricity users. And we all know what that does when you have electricity. You know, it really opens people up to the modern world. Today we're talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of that. So to really, bridge our development gap in Nigeria, the first thing first, we must have electricity, and then we can start thinking of how to be productive with using the electricity. So I see that being a good opportunity for Nigeria in terms of how renewable energy can play a role in the energy mix. And, also bringing in technologies like, clean cooking, use of solar, and possibly wind in some of these communities. I think that also helps to actually develop the Nigerian energy space. Another key thing is also, providing that reliability, because beyond just access, you also need reliable power. And we all know now that the grid supply hasn't been that reliable. And, daytime, at least, you can, to a large extent, depend on solar for daytime supply. So what we started seeing in Nigeria is that people who live in rural communities, sometimes even have better supply than those who live in urban communities. And maybe there is a thing or two that can be learned from how reliable power is provided for those customers to ensure that the grid supply can be more reliable. And I think that speaks to, maybe how some of these new technologies like battery energy storage systems can actually be also used to not just provide reliable power in rural communities, but also provide reliable power in urban communities where you and I live. And I think one other key thing I want to add is really, in the area of productivity. I see renewable energy really coming in to drive productivity, whether you're talking about productivity in terms of, production of agricultural produce in rural communities using maybe solar-powered irrigation pumps, whether it's productivity in terms of processing those agricultural produce. So imagine if you're able to provide solar-powered irrigation pumps for rice farmers, which increase their yield, and they're able to farm more. Then as they farm more, they can actually also have maybe solar-powered, maybe rice threshing stations that help them to also, process the rice that they've produced. Mini grids provide an avenue for having renewable energy as a source of power in those communities. And those farmers can actually, on the one hand, support their production activities, but also support their processing activities. And this really opens up, a value chain where more value can be added to the agricultural produce. And what that really translates to is more money. If it's possible for, those people to also have maybe electric bikes or electric motorcycles or tricycles, those also help them to move those processed produce to the nearest market where they can earn more economic value from the same produce. So renewable energy really comes in to catalyze change and development that we think will be very, very important as we face the future. And I'm sure that is something that we all look forward to seeing the impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Chibeze. So that's on the back of what you have said, which are very key points. What are the key challenges? What key challenges do you think are hindering the faster adoption of renewable energy solutions in Nigeria? Because we know the importance of renewable energy, and we know our energy deficit challenges. So in my mind, I'm thinking, if this technology plays such a significant role, what challenges have hindered the faster adoption to sort of scale up electricity generation capacity in the country?
Okay, I would say the one major challenge, we always know it's mostly when it comes to looking at how much one has to spend to acquire this technology, which is cost. For most people, the complaint is always about, the high upfront cost for such systems. And I think that challenge only just throws up opportunities for innovation in terms of business models, in terms of appliance finance frameworks that can be used to ensure that this perception that the costs are high for renewable energy products can actually be demystified so that people can have more access. And I know that a lot of financing partners are looking at how to ensure that people can actually pay for power as a service. So you don't need to really just the same way you pay for electricity from the discos, you can also have a system where you top up, the use of these appliances or the energy that comes from these appliances. So I think that's only one framework that is useful to deal with the cost perception. But I think another challenge too is really the issue of people not having much awareness, and understanding the benefits of solar energy, wind energy, biomass, biogas, and also how they're actually available. We have, huge amount of these resources in most parts of Nigeria, but people are not aware of how to really harness these resources and to convert them to their benefit. So I think awareness is another thing that is a challenge that I think there's also room to bridge that gap to help people understand how, for example, solar energy works. What are the potential cost savings from switching to solar instead of maybe using unclean sources like petrol or diesel generators? What are the environmental benefits of maybe having a solar home system to power your house instead of using candles and other unclean sources? So to bridge that gap of awareness, I think it will also help. And I think one other challenge, I think, is really in terms of how much we as a country domesticate the value chain. A lot of manufacturing of these products are done abroad: inverters, panels, batteries, meters. To some extent, there are efforts to maybe domesticate some parts of it or try to, and then we also know that there is a local assembly of solar panels being done in Lagos today. But I think there's a lot of room to really drive building capacity in that space because the more we can actually locally produce a lot of the components in the value chain, I think the better it will be overall, because there'll be a less strain on our foreign currency, and then the economy can actually boost with renewable energy, providing that power that's actually needed for the economy to grow. So in summary, we need to have more awareness. There should be more education to really bridge the knowledge gap. There should be financial incentives to really drive people being able to actually use this renewable energy without feeling like there is a huge upfront cost. And maybe to some extent, a few demonstration projects here and there can actually help people to understand that this actually works and that it's something that is viable for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Chibueze. Just to follow up, you talked a lot about what needs to be done industry-wide. As the CEO of Sea Solar Energy Limited, what unique approaches does your company take to promote renewable energy adoption in both businesses and communities? And how do you also adopt global best practices in renewable energy to suit the specific needs and context of communities, especially given your diverse international experience as an individual and as a company?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think for us, really, we try to really look at this space as one where we're really fortunate to play a role in, and we're very passionate about what we do in terms of how we support businesses and communities. And for us, really, in order to be able to promote renewable energy adoption for communities and businesses, we really try to ensure that they understand that renewable energy can actually support their productivity. And that brings us to ensuring that whether we're engaging with businesses or communities, we're always preaching the need to be more productive and how the power can actually power their productivity. And at the same time, encourage them to use energy efficient appliances. And with that, they can actually see that, use of renewable energy can actually both support the top line and the bottom line for them. And I think that has been very, very helpful in terms of helping them to, look at adopting renewable energy. And then another thing that is very key, is in terms of quality, because a lot of people have that notion that renewable energy is not reliable, or, you install, solar or inverter for people's houses and within a year it's packing up. But you and I know that most times, maybe they're working with roadside installers or, people who compromise on the quality of, installation in terms of design, wiring and all of that. So we try to ensure that quality is hardly put to question. And if at all it is put to question, we are prompt to really ensure that we correct any negative impressions that might have been created due to any questioning on quality, so that way we can actually be the real ambassadors for renewable energy, just like most of us in the space, like Habiba and other developers, try to ensure that we are also providing, we are also leading as good examples for people to actually see and believe that renewable energy can actually make an impact. and that it can actually substitute for energy that is not clean. I give you an example. Some people don't know that maybe solar installations can carry air conditioners, right? And with that awareness being created, it helps them to know that solar energy can actually be a real alternative for running their diesel generators. Some people will come and say, well, they want solar installed, but they want it to carry everything and fridge, freezer, and all of that. But that also comes at a higher cost. So we always try to ensure that people understand that yes, it is an alternative, but here are the modalities and what you need to understand about how it can be an alternative. If you want to carry more air conditioners, probably need to have more storage. That probably leads to more cost, but we always try to ensure that people are given the understanding that they need, so that when they're enjoying the product, they know that they got value for money, and they didn't feel like they were maybe told one thing and something else was done. I think another key thing really for us in terms of how to really promote adoption is innovation. Innovation is at the core of our approach, and that's very important because in this modern day and time, cutting-edge technologies are really there, cutting-edge solutions are really there, but not just in technology. You can also have innovation in terms of business models. You can be a bit more creative with how you ensure that you promote the adoption. Take, for example, when we had telecoms in Nigeria, you had MTN and you had Airtel, or then it was, I think, Econet. But then Globalcom came in with their own innovation in terms of business model to charge per second instead of per minute. And that really grew the space and grew adoption of the use of phones and cellular technology. So we also see innovation, not just in technology, because if it's technology, I think the world is already awash with very interesting and innovative technologies. But can we innovate in terms of business models? Can we innovate in terms of financing? Can we innovate in terms of how we engage with some of these off-takers? Can we innovate in terms of contractual arrangements? I think that's even one that might be very interesting, right? So as much as we think of innovation, let's think of it not just in technology, but every other thing that can, probe us to think far and wide. And I think that's really how we try to ensure that we promote the adoption, so that the more the market grows, the more the benefits accrues to everyone. And, the more people that have renewable energy as their primary energy supply source, or possibly their only energy supply source, the more we can be sure that we are cutting down on carbon emissions and we're actually playing a key role in the energy transition.
Thank you very much, Engineer Chibueze. So the last question for you, you've talked about your what CSolar is doing, and they are doing a lot of impactful initiatives. I like the powering production. But how important, but it's also important to collaborate and partner with stakeholders and industry investors. So how important do you think public-private collaboration is in advancing renewable energy initiatives, and what successful partnerships have you been involved in that have driven positive outcomes?
Okay, thank you for that. I think public-private partnerships have actually proven to be a model that works today. A lot of people know that it's really important to be able to leverage partnerships. I think from our own perspective, we've been able to participate in the Nigeria Education Project, which is funded by the World Bank. And that is a good example of how public-private partnership has really come to drive renewable energy in terms of providing grants to developers like us and others to be able to actually create energy access in these communities. So that really deals with the issue of access to finance. I know that the African Development Bank is playing a key role in trying to ensure that as the World Bank is providing support in terms of funding mini grids, they also provide support in terms of how they really, help developers to get access to funding for productive use equipment. So in terms of public-private partnership, those two are very important, and I know that World Bank and AFD have really played a key role, and I know that they are looking to play, I think, even bigger roles going forward with the DES program, where the funding wallet size has increased, and it really leads to more people participating, and also those who have been participants before being enabled and encouraged to do more. So when it comes to public-private partnership, that has really been fundamental, and the Rural Education Agency of Nigeria has really played a key role to ensure that those partnerships have grown. I know that other development partners are coming into the space to provide catalytic funding to really grow the space. But one key thing to note in terms of public-private partnership is that with the demonstration that has been done by a few developers, and the fact that we have up to 100 mini grids developed already in the country, you now have institutional investors showing a lot more interest in the space. So while we've always had, globally, institutional investors who are established in developed climes, but locally, we're looking at some of our local players now showing more appetite. So to provide never dominated long-term loans to developers. So you have the likes of InfraCredit, you have the likes of Chapel Hill, providing more interest because there's line of sight to what the program is about, which is really providing access to rural communities in Nigeria, and also providing and even looking at interconnected mini grids as well as C&I customers. So I think there has been good demonstration of the fact that public-private partnerships can definitely work. And I think that's one thing we're happy to be a part of.
Thank you very much, Engineer Chibeze. Thank you so much for the insightful contributions. We'll be moving on to Mrs. Habiba Ali. Mrs. Habiba Ali, please confirm that you can hear me before I proceed. Mrs. Habiba Ali.
Sorry, I was looking for this mute button.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah.
I'll just give a brief background before I move on to the questions. So the rural renewable energy projects in Africa focus on addressing energy poverty prevalent in rural areas, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And these initiatives aim to provide sustainable and affordable electricity solutions to communities that have historically been unserved by centralized urban grids. By leveraging renewable resources like solar, wind, and biomass, these projects implement standalone mini grids to power villages and enhance rural electrification, which is something your company engages in. So projects in countries like Cameroon and Benin, they've successfully deployed renewable energy maps to design rural electrification master plans, and they've incorporated various renewable energy sources. Now, can you please share some insight into your experience with implementing renewable energy solutions in rural communities, particularly in Nigeria? And while talking about that, can you also address some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in deploying some of these renewable energy products in these rural areas and how you've been able to address them? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me. And I apologize that I may not, I don't know, I hope we survive it, but my device is pretty low, and I've just realized that my battery charger is not here, but I have switched off my phone, so just in case I will save the battery on the phone to join the webinar if the laptop goes off. So like I said, thank you so much for having me on the program. And as I'll just share a bit about who SUSE is, so that then that can form like the backdrop of the kind of work that we do. At SOSE, we like to call ourselves, or rather, we are actually doing business for the good of society. And because we're doing business for the good of society, we deploy solutions across rural, especially rural communities of Nigeria. It doesn't mean we don't do work in the urban areas, but we try to do work in the rural communities of Nigeria, because this is where there's actually a very huge need for electrification. Because if you see the statistics that stand, that say about 80% of the people in rural areas do not currently have access to reliable, I mean, key word on the reliable, they do not have access to the reliable electrification of their communities. So we do our work by deploying solutions like solar home systems, mini grids, solar powered productive use of energy like solar kiosks, solar dryers, solar. We're currently now going into solar milling and looking at solar irrigation as well, due to a project that we started. And then of course, solar refrigeration. We have done at SOSE several projects that are funded by, let's say, international organizations, and we have also sold solutions and also used those solutions to also develop the capacity of the women in communities by ensuring that they have economic growth possibilities, especially in northern Nigeria, where, because the woman is primarily supposed to be known as that person who is the home carer, she doesn't have as much opportunities as her male colleagues, especially in our rural areas. So we've done funding with projects with funding from USADF. We deployed mini grids, which are tied to solar dryers and solar kiosks in 2 communities. We got another USADF/All-On Power Africa grant to do a project in Edo State, where we deployed a mini grid and tied that to also heat pump dryers, and also deployed solar home systems for the people around that. With DFID's support, we've done projects like deploying 22 units actually of solar tunnel dryers in 7 solar drying hubs across 3 states in northern Nigeria. That's Kaduna, Gombe, and Adamawa. And we've also worked with USAID to get money from their project they call the Beyond COVID project, Feed the Future, or something like that, and the food challenge. And we use that funding to optimize some of these hubs. So when we first built it, we just built out the hubs, just put dryers in the hubs and thought, okay, people will come and dry. We didn't think about the slicing. We didn't think about the sterilization. We didn't think about packaging and all of that. So this USAID funding helped us to support the women to, like, really start a full-blown business in about 3 or 4 of those hubs. I think there were 3 of those hubs, and they could now actually package products that we could sell. So they were selling products like dried tomatoes, dried peppers, dried stew mix. We also had dried onions and pineapples and mangoes as well. We recently got funding from USTDA to carry out a feasibility study across 3 states in Nigeria, 100 communities, Kogi, Kaduna, and Plateau states. The consortium that won that consultancy was called SESI CREATS, EMG and SESI and CREATS. And they did the feasibility study. They first of all did a site assessment that showed us that only 64 of those sites would be really commercially viable for mini grids. And so we concentrated on those 64 sites and did the full-blown feasibility study that was capturing information like what came out of it was preliminary engineering design, environmental and social management plans, regulatory and legal analysis, economic and financial analysis, investment memorandum, development impact assessment, and implementation plan with recommendations. We're hoping that this project, when completed, will ensure that over 200,000 people will have access to electricity in their homes, meaning like 21,000 to 22,000 homes, about totally, with the commercial and productive use of energy solutions as well. It's about 24,500 connections. We're currently ensuring that those solutions are going to mean that we have 6 megawatts of PV, 9.7 megahertz of storage, and the attendant benefits that come with that. But at SOSE, what we've always prided ourselves with, and the reason why we've gone so far to do all of this, is it is all coming from the need to ensure that people have the solutions. It is, to make money is really, really very important, because money is driving everything that we do, but it is quite important as well to also remember that these people, the people that we work for, actually have a living need, right? People need to have the electricity. It is that electricity that will ensure that there's development. It is that development that will ensure, for me, one of the major things I look at, because I grew up with a father who was a policeman that got transferred severally to rural areas. And I lived in a rural area, in several rural areas, that life was good, life was fun, everything was there, at least to a certain level, except electricity. And I could see the zeal of the people from the rural communities actually have a lot of stamina, a lot of need. They want to also stay at home, right? And recently I was in one community, one of our communities called Nyeleng in Faraway, inside the rocks in Pangshin. And I remember one of the old men said, if only we had electricity, and this electricity can give our children businesses, we're very sure they will not even go to town. And now we need them, because look at me, I'm very old. I cannot do the farm work I used to do. I cannot do a lot of things, but these children are not close by to support me anymore. So you can imagine. I remember we had village headmaster, if you remember, when we were growing up. People wanted to work in communities because, I mean, they had all the facilities that they needed. Electricity will drive a lot of these facilities: better schools, better water, better food, and a lot of things. So for me, it's quite key that as much as we are seeking development, we also seek development to enrich our rural communities. When you go abroad, when you go to Germany, especially, where I have a bit of knowledge, you will find that people who live in the villages are actually better off than the people who live in urban areas. They have a better life. They have everything that they are rich. They are the ones that are actually the rich people. But here, the reverse is the case. It is the people who live in urban areas that suffer. So when you look at the way renewable energies is cut out, especially the distributed nature of it, you will find that it is actually going to ensure that all the development that relies on electricity or energy will be found in the community. So our dream at SOSE is to be that organization that sits in that community and provides all access to all of the energy needs that the community will have as much as possible, So that's why you see we from one of the projects that we do to the next, we're trying to see what other thing does the community need. And it's very important for us to listen to them and deploy solutions that they bring forward and say, this is what we want answers to now.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. I like the personal touch to it. I can see the passion. I could feel the passion for driving improvement and bringing electricity to the rural communities, which is really key. And I know society is very big on women empowerment and inclusion of women in renewable energy projects. I know you're very passionate about that. So what approaches have you adopted to promote inclusion of women and also even empowering them in renewable energy projects in the rural communities where you have worked with? And how can those empowerment strategies be effectively utilized? Even the empowerment strategies that you've adopted in general, how can they be effectively utilized to promote renewable energy adoption, fostering participation of women in particular, especially in leadership roles in the project?
Okay, so if you know my story, you'll know SOSE was started because of women. My mom used to own a roadside restaurant, and we cooked on an open fire by the light of a kerosene lantern. And growing up, we started the NGO there, where we were doing the first UNFCCC CDM project with improved cook stoves. This was like in 2009, 2010. I was invited to speak on behalf of Developmental Association to Renewable Energies in Uganda during the Partnership for Clean Indoor Air. And that's when I was speaking about and coming from the angle of, oh, stop cooking on open fires, it's cut down our trees, we're losing our environment. I was coming from the climate change angle on that fight, only to hear the health angle. And that was quite shocking, because when you hear that for every hour, for every 2 hours, someone stays around an open fire or a kerosene lantern, they had smoked and inhaled an equivalent of a pack of cigarette. And my mom cooked on open fires for so long. I cooked on open fires, and we sometimes when we had to stay late in the shop, we used kerosene lanterns. So that means we had been smoking cigarette for all of our lives. And when she also did list the health challenges attendant to it, I had recently, maybe 3 years prior, lost my sister, and it was due to some breathing problem as well. And I just kept thinking maybe that even exacerbated some of her, problems. And so coming back home, just as I stepped out of the hall, I see solar. I said, okay, in my head, you got the fireplace figured out. At least if more people adopt the improved cook stoves, it means that we'll have less women inhaling all of these cigarette smokes. So, but then what do you do about the kerosene lantern? And at this time, I wasn't even thinking about solar lanterns, but stepping out of the hall, someone was peddling barefoot power. And that's how I essentially started to say, because I bought some of the lanterns, worked with my team, Safia Liu and others that were with us then. And we put these lanterns for women who were selling. Of course, at this time, Momsi was no longer selling. We didn't have the shop anymore. So, but I still bought akara, bread and stuff from women who cooked by the roadside, by the light of a kerosene lantern. So all I could think about was those women. So we replaced, for some of them who were selling bread and stuff, those lanterns, and said, okay, just test it for us for a few months. And it was really a big deal coming back a few months later, and they didn't want to let go, because they were now talking to you about how their neighbors saw it and how they wanted it. So that's how we started having core women selling these solutions for us in communities since 2010. And these women sold and made their own profit off of these sales. But as we grew and became well known, I realized that we couldn't handle all of this under SUSE. So we had to set up another women organization called Mata Ariwan SUSE, which Sophia now heads. And every woman who works with SUSE and is selling or using renewable energies to power her business, like the solar dryers, the solar refrigeration, and all of that, we want to make them the the Massy champions, and they become part of the Massy. And what we do, and we've done several projects. For example, I spoke about the solar drying project earlier. For all of the hubs, we have a team of at least 10 women who are manning the hubs, and they are the ones who ensure that the produce the farmers bring are dried. But so they can't do it. How many staff can I take to do all of that? So they man this hubs, and then the people bring produce to dry. They are the ones who take care of the hub, ensure the dryers are working, dry the produce for the people, and collect money. So what we expect from them is like a leasehold agreement. At the end of every month, they pay us something for using the SUSE hub. We also did get a support from an EC project, a third-party project for Energy Commission. Sorry, not Energy Commission, European Commission, where they were doing accelerating green innovation, accelerating digital innovation in agriculture, something like that. And there are like 10 third-party projects across West Africa. The second party project owner is called the CP out of Kenya. And we and another project in Funab are handling the ones in Nigeria. And this project is called the Market Map. We market, our own project is called Market Map. Their own is called Smart Soil. And what we're doing is we're mapping area. We're developing a tool that can actually map areas where what are the processing needs for the farmers in that area, and how many of alternative of those processing needs are currently existent in that community. And so, for example, let's say when we map, we find that there's a huge need for milling, and we've tried to find what are the other alternatives, and we find diesel mills, and we try to figure out. The map tries to figure out how far away from each other, the distance and the number of farmers. And if we install a solar powered mill in that region, what competition does the person have to do? And then we develop a business plan in the map, and that relates to solar milling, and hopefully ties to microfinance institutions. And they can then look at it and see the viability of such a project and be the ones to fund the women to own, say, the solar milling machine. And so the women can actually pay them across maybe 24 months or something like that. So we've finished developing that that map. We are actually going to launch it, I believe, May 28th. And the idea is that now that it is fully developed, we can use it to ensure that women can deploy solutions, productive use of energy solutions in several areas, have very good data that they can share with the bank to ensure that they are being funded to own those businesses. So this is what we're also doing, and we do not want men on that. Sorry, it's women that are actually manning such solutions. Yeah. So, and most of our activities, honestly, we just channel it to the communities through the women. It's not because we do not like the men, but I come from the north, and most of my work is in rural north. The women of the northern rural areas are not as, would I say, lucky or, as readily helped as other people, other rural women, or even the women from the urban north. So I see there's a need to help them find their own capacity, develop it, and support them to grow. So that's really what we do.
Wow, very, very insightful. I love the concept of the map. Is it going to be like a live map? And
Yeah,
I love
it's a live map.
That's how you're connecting it with financiers so they can also support. It's really, that's really impactful.
We're very, very excited about the map, actually. And we had to develop an app to it so that we can actually collect more data and get more information on the map. So as we deploy to other regions, because it's currently restricted to I think about 3 or 4 communities in Kaduna, we're hoping that we can actually cover the whole of Kaduna State, then go to the next states, like that. So for everything that we do, we're constantly thinking, how do we make it sustainable? How do we build on it? How do we make it accessible to other people, even if it is not us, but let it be valuable to people who are outside of our regions?
Yeah. Very nice. I hope you would come to the south once you have deployed it in the north, because there are also
hopefully
women in the south who need such opportunities. But very good, very impactful. Thank you very much, Abibakar.
Thank you.
From your insights, and I felt the passion and the personal touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be moving over to Mrs. Amina Ibrahim. Mrs. Amina Ibrahim, please, can you confirm that you can hear me? So that
yes, I can.
Thank you very much, and welcome. We're going to be moving on to the justice tenants. Amina is an expert in this area and she'll be sharing some insights. So Amina, I'll just proceed to give like a background before I proceed to the question. So we spoke about energy justice, and we know it's a multi-layered, human-centric theoretical approach that challenges injustice and inequality in the energy sector. Of course, it aims to achieve equality in social, economic, and political participation within the energy system, ultimately making the entire system more ethical. Now, energy justice adds a human dimension to the energy system, considering the long-standing notion of virtue, utility, happiness, welfare, freedom, distributive justice, and procedural justice. The concept addresses injustices associated with the global energy system, such as energy inefficiencies, externalities, human rights issues, energy poverty, climate change impacts, and so on. So in your experience with public sector policy efficiency, how can governments better incorporate energy justice principles into their decision-making processes to promote renewable energy adoption in communities?
Thank you very much for this question, Evie. And I'd like to begin from one of the comments Habiba made in her presentation. And she basically, to summarize what she said, renewable energy adoption is largely characterized by the needs of communities. And, that's where that human-centric aspect of energy justice actually comes to play. Energy justice actually envisions an energy system where both the benefits and burdens that result from this energy infrastructure, or these energy technologies, or even the decisions are fairly distributed. It does this by, actually recognizing who has a say in this energy system, or who has a say in the kind of energy systems that should be deployed. And taking you back to what she said, it's coming out of their needs. So you see that it's the community that actually should actually have a say in the decision-making process. Therefore, for governments to better, incorporate principles of, energy justice into decision making, it has to actually operationalize the tenets of energy justice. These tenets are actually placeholders for addressing different types of, justice issues. And the tenets are procedural justice, like you mentioned during your presentation, recognition justice, and distributive justice, including restorative justice. There are about 4 of them. And for recognition justice, like I mentioned, it actually considers who is impacted. And from what we've heard so far, is the community that is actually impacted. So that shows that there's need for the community voice in that process. Then for procedural justice is how are these considerations, how are they being addressed? Basically, it's saying how do decision makers choose to engage with these communities. And then distributive justice involves a fair distribution of, the benefits, the burdens. So what are the benefits that come out of this renewable energy infrastructure, or even what are the benefits of actually transitioning, like Engineer Chibuze said in the beginning, it comes from an early, interaction in terms of knowledge, trying to share that knowledge. So you need to get them to understand what the benefits are, and then, begin to see what are the burdens in terms of, impacts that it would have on them and their lifestyle and everything that comes with it. And then the 4th aspect is the restorative justice angle, which is something I'm very more passionate about because it comes from the angle of actually mitigation. So you see that early engagement, early interaction, early knowledge sharing now gets you to the point of mitigation. And even where these burdens have been placed on them, or harms have been placed on them, you actually also have that option of, repair. So that's where restorative justice comes in. So to promote the adoption of, renewable energy, the energy transition policy that a government should drive must be driven from the point of, unique experiences of these communities. And as much as I really do like the work that Habiba and her team are doing, because they're learning from the experiences. The first deployment of infrastructure that they did not take into consideration, the million aspect. And now, they're also trying to deploy this, map that she tried to explain. So basically, it's learning from experiences of these, communities, coming from their strengths, the viewpoints of all these members. So in essence, it must be truly just. For it to be just, it has to have their voice in it. An example I would say is far away in Norway, the Sami people, there was the deployment of, wind farms in that community. But there was that lack of, consideration for the lifestyle of these people. And hence the because they had to take the matter to court, the Supreme Court said that was a violation on the Sami people's human rights, and also said that the issuing of licenses by the Norwegian government for these wind farms were illegal, therefore questioning, or faulting the decision-making process of, of issuing these licenses, or by the Norwegian government. So in essence, this energy justice, incorporating energy justice in decision-making, allows governments to make, more meaningful decisions about, the production of renewable energy, the delivery, the use, including the kind of impacts. Chibueze made mention of, the social angle, and, that comes from a very strong part, because there's need to actually bridge a lot of social gaps. These social gaps come from energy access, which is very rampant in Nigeria. There's that poor energy access, and then energy poverty, with the recent hiking, even cost of electricity, many communities would actually struggle. So policies must actually do move closer to achieving socially just energy systems that explicitly link the energy transition, the adoption of renewable energies with, social justice issues.
Thank you very much, Amina. Given your background in strategic management and crisis communication, how can we effectively communicate the benefits of renewable energy adoption to diverse communities, ensuring that there is inclusivity and understanding from an energy justice perspective?
Thank you again for that question. And you see, communication is actually key when in decision making. It's key in the energy transition process. So to winning the support of communities where this renewable energy infrastructure will be embedded is critical to ensuring any success in the adoption and the advancement of this renewable energy. This can only be achieved by effective communication with the goal of receiving social license to operate for both government and for this renewable energy companies that intend to, and even for the promoters of renewable energy. So this is where, for me, I would say 2 tenets of energy justice comes to play. Recognition justice and procedural justice. These are key elements. Like I mentioned earlier, with recognition justice, it identifies all the key stakeholders that need to be part of that decision-making process, while procedural justice in this sense focuses on the processes and how decision makers treat, communities that would be impacted. Hence, to effectively communicate the benefits of renewable energy communication, there's need for a mix of communication tactics, if you would put it that way. The messages that are target specific for communities and, highly dependent. You're one of the first sentences you made was that it's not a one size fit all kind of thing. So there's need for it to be highly, dependent on the stage of the adoption process. The international human rights law, the UN guiding principles on doing business and human rights, the performance standards of most financial institutions like the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, actually do provide for free and fair prior information. It's actually free prior informed consent for communities to design in the design and the implementation of this energy projects. So at the early stage of the adoption process, it would be best for this communication to be non-generic, in the sense that studies have actually even shown that non-generic customized information in the early stage of the adoption process actually generates more awareness. And that's where Engineer Chibueze was saying that there's need to actually interact and gain knowledge, also share knowledge in terms of these technologies. At this stage, it's more characterized with energy community engagements. It's more characterized with community engagements that provide relevant information, that provides a platform for two-way dialogue. This increases community awareness, like I said, provides the relevant kind of information that clarifies for these, communities, the kind of collective benefits that will they will stand to gain, the country will stand to gain. As you are aware that, many countries have made several commitments to achieving net zero. So it's a two-way benefit theme. And then these are largely placed on principles of, transparency, active consultation, addressing the concerns of, affected communities. It's also important to note here that without that minimum amount of, engagement and, knowledge sharing, it will be difficult for potential adopters of, renewable energy to ask relevant questions. And when the actual adoption of this comes to play, or as we move along the adoption process line to make the relevant decisions, it will become very difficult and may even lead to a possibility of them withholding, the social license to operate and embed this infrastructure within their communities. Moving further, I think the follow-on stages of the adoption process should actually rely on communication that leans on customized information. Here now, the information is now targeted at, the communities, no more generic as it was. It answers the questions and the requirements of these communities who are actually the adopters, and for these businesses who are also the adopters of renewable energy. This full information disclosure and, proper policy mechanisms encourage public participation and also gives, community empowerment that are essential to, achieving procedural justice. And that's a key element for energy justice in decision making. The strategy involves including this community, that's the inclusivity of, these stakeholders in the decision-making process. And what this does is reducing the vagueness and the uncertainty often associated with, renewable energy adoption process. And more importantly, it helps in the management of, very complex social issues. There are issues of, land ownership, issues of health, issues of, livelihood. The earlier example I gave, the Sami people, their growls with the wind farms is that it impacted on their agricultural lifestyles because they are actually reindeer farmers.
Thank you, Amina. So the next, I think you've answered some of the next question, but I'll merge it with the final one. So can you share some more insight on the intersection between energy vulnerability, rights, and sustainable energy development in the context of promoting renewable energy adoption within communities? And how do you see the role of community engagement and empowerment in advancing the energy transition?
Okay, thank you again. The United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction actually has, in defining risk, has this terminology that is coherent with, sustainable development goals for which many countries are signed up to. They defined vulnerability as conditions that determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors, or even processes that increase the susceptibility of an individual or even the community at large, the energy system also, to be susceptible to hazards or harm. Essentially, vulnerability is related to relationships in terms of political, environmental, economic factors. This, where I say relationship in this sense is how you interrelate with government, how you interrelate with businesses is largely dependent on political factors. It's largely dependent on these economic factors. So that actually do help to sustain your economic lifestyle or help to sustain, your well-being. It's either is sustained or it's contested. So it's either you're a friend or you're a foe. in that sense. Therefore, energy vulnerability is related to the precarity or the exclusion resulting from energy systems and its related decisions. So that's where energy vulnerability lies. Being an academic, in literature, energy vulnerability has been described in various ways. It's sometimes described as the extent to which a community is affected by the adverse effects of events resulting in impacts on their economic, social, environmental, or even governance risk. And it's also described in very, for want of a better word, layman terms of energy poverty or lack of energy access. Therefore, the framing of energy vulnerability is largely dependent on what people are vulnerable to. Are they vulnerable to the lack of access, or are they vulnerable to poverty? So that's to say, where are these injustices actually produced? In my own research, I frame it from a very, temporal stance in terms of the adverse impacts of energy decisions, looking at the way decision makers make their decisions and how it impacts. I specifically look at communities that have are placed in this vulnerable situation as a result of not being able to be part of the decision-making process. However, these energy infrastructure have to be embedded within those communities because of certain reasons, either political reasons, proximity, or it's actually the best place to actually cite it. Like the Sami people I used earlier on, citing those wind farms there is best because of the expanse of land that is there, and that would be able to have those plants to be more effective. And this has an impact on community rights in terms of rights related to life, related to air, related to environment, related to dignity, related to livelihoods, and so on. These rights can be infringed by the adverse impacts from the decisions that decision makers make. So when you are giving out licenses to site this energy infrastructure, or you are trying to make decisions as to how people can adopt this energy, renewable energy solutions, but are you looking at how does it impact their current lifestyle? It may provide them access to light, but would it have an impact on the way they carry out their livelihoods in terms of agriculture? And their livelihoods is likely linked to their dignity, which is likely linked to their happiness as being. So all these, without these considerations for these things, were basically tilting towards injustices. Renewable energy sector, as we all know, is largely associated with various human rights violations that come up in terms of forced displacement, adverse impacts on, like I've said, I think I'm actually repeating myself here again, but I'm just trying to make emphasis on the kind of injustices that can actually come out, and this shows that link. So in a nutshell, to seize the opportunities that are presented in renewable energy adoption, there is need to pursue the agenda for sustainable energy development. And that is one that actually considers energy resources that can address the energy gaps. Energy gaps can be in terms of access or poverty or just vulnerability in terms, without jeopardizing the community needs, which is the kind of work that society does, like Habiba said. So linking those needs to also future generations, so without impacting what the future generation would benefit, and that means taking very great cognizance of the impacts it will have on the climate in a manner that advances economic development, improves security, energy security, and mitigates any climate change challenges around them. This it's basically, it's important to note that there's that link between sustainable development and sustainable development goals. Basically, sustainable energy development is a key component of sustainable development goals. So all these addressing energy vulnerability means you are upholding the rights of communities, means that you are striving for sustainable energy development and in a large sense, trying to achieve sustainable development goals.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was
You,
going to
you
touch
want to
on,
add? Okay, yes, please go on.
yeah, I was going to touch on the second part of your question that you were asking about the role of community engagement and empowerment. And community engagement and empowerment actually do play a very significant role in advancing the energy transition. And it ensures that the transitions are just, which is what energy justice seeks to achieve. This is where procedural justice element of energy justice comes to play. Community engagement actually does require the interaction of communities and decision makers. And this is where recognition justice relies on, local knowledge to inflect upon decision making, to ensure that the processes of decision making is not a top-down approach, but actually a bottom-up approach in public decision making. This way, the views and the opinions of these local communities are actually incorporated in every stage of the decision for the adoption of this renewable energy. Community empowerment basically gives voice to this community to play in this decision-making process. It facilitates greater information disclosure. And like I said earlier, it's a two-way dialogue route that has been opened there. Hence, it also allows for, better representation. In a nutshell, it fosters, community ownership of this adoption process, where there's buy-in, where there's buy-in for this process or for the adoption, where they understand the benefits, where they know that they are not just taking in the burdens of what it is, then they begin to own these projects. They do not just give the social license to operate, but they also become, part of ensuring that this license to operate is constantly in play and is constantly, upheld. There's a case in Kenya. It's another wind farm in Kenya. It's called the Kipeto wind farm. The proponents of that wind farm are actually in literature an example of how this decision making should take place in terms of community engagement and community empowerment. The proponents from the early stage of that development phase engaged with these communities, engaged in consultations, did not just fly away with the license that they had, but had to come into this community to address issues of, land ownership. And then by selling this project and telling them that it lasts for this number of years, but however, you can have a say in how we do, and you tell us where it would impact on your lifestyle. That was bringing, showing respect to their culture and, to their already established Maasai institutions, and ensuring that the process was highly inclusive and all that. There are several mechanisms that can be used to achieve, community engagement and empowerment. Some of them are community liaison officers, or you can say community development agreements. What do these mechanisms do? Besides creating that fora, it also helps in trust building and, concretizing, the social responsibility that decision makers have towards these communities.
Very much, Amina. Thank you for the very insightful and academic contributions. I took a lot of points regarding communication strategies, community justice in promoting inclusion in the community, and of course now talking about community engagement. I think you pointed out a lot of key principles, and the case studies were very relevant in driving home the points you raised. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Mr. Wilfred. Mr. Wilfred, can you please confirm that you can hear me before I proceed, please?
Yes, thank you. I can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilfred. Welcome. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little background before I move on to your questions, just to set the stage. So the interplay between climate literacy and the adoption of renewable energy projects is crucial for driving sustainable practices. Climate literacy empowers individuals to understand the significance of renewable energy sources, leading to informed decisions and active participation in green initiatives. And of course, research indicates that literacy, both financial and energy related, plays a significant role in promoting the adoption of green technologies and practices. Now, considering your focus on climate literacy through the various programs you are involved in, how do you incorporate educational initiatives to empower individuals within communities, fostering a deeper understanding of renewable energy benefits and also encouraging active participation in the energy transition?
Thank you so much, Evia, for the question. Well, at Glow Initiative, we understand the power, of education in promoting sustainable practices, and helping people understand the benefits of renewable energy. So, our belief as an organization extends beyond just meeting energy needs, right? We try to, create a safe and clean environment, especially in the very impoverished rural communities that we work in. So we recognize that when people are informed about the advantages of sustainable energy, even in the face of challenges like poverty, which is a common denominator in most communities that we work in, particularly in the southeast and south areas of Nigeria. I know it's almost the same across the country. So we understand that education and awareness can trigger a community-based approach to energy transition. There's no doubt about it. I heard you talk about, bottom-top approach, and many of the speakers have actually mentioned that. So this understanding drives us to channel a lot of our energies on championing educational programs, that promote climate literacy and empower individuals on the socioeconomic and also the environmental importance of adopting sustainable, energy options. I'm going to speak about, we do a lot of programs, but I'll just speak about one or two, right? We have what we call the Climate Ambassadors Literacy Program. What we do with that program is that we, actively engage students and teachers, in learning about climate change and renewable energy. The program is primarily focused on climate literacy, but because we recognize that mitigating climate change requires reducing carbon footprint. And how do we get this footprint? Majorly is trying to meet our energy needs, right? So we can't talk about fighting climate change if we don't talk about addressing our carbon footprint, and so we understand the interplay, between this, so that's why with the program, we try to provide students and teachers with the knowledge and tools to understand, the science of climate change and the role of renewable energy in mitigating its effects, right? We understand also that if you go across Nigeria, communities are beginning to feel the impact of climate change like never before. You can go to a community, they will tell you that this is before now, this was our traditional means of getting water, maybe a local stream, and suddenly it gets dried up. And maybe you ask them, why is this stream dried up? They tell you maybe the gods are angry with us or something like that. You try you try to make them understand that this could be as a result of the impact of climate change, because most times, of course, farmers have traditional planting, calendars and all that. So because of disruption of rainfall pattern, it's alternating the way, the practice agriculture. And sometimes they do not understand what's behind this. They don't understand what the problem is. So we try to educate them that these are actually the impacts of climate change. And we are also trying to highlight that renewable energy is one way, adopting renewable energy options is one way which we can mitigate these impacts and make our communities safer. So in the program, we discuss, topics such as maybe greenhouse gas emission. We talk about renewable energy sources. We talk about sustainable practices, not just in energy generation, but as well in agriculture. So we try to empower them to influence these students, to influence their communities. These students, they come from families, and whether you like it or not, they understand the message we're trying to pass. And so we're trying to raise them as, to influence their communities to take action, that reduces or that causes harm to the environment, right? In the way of trying to meet energy needs, okay? And also with this program, we try to emphasize the importance of advocacy, and community engagement. So we teach our students, we teach them, the importance of advocacy and community engagement. We try to help them learn how to communicate climate change issues effectively through storytelling and all that. We teach them how to engage their communities to promote sustainable practices, So we basically try to nurture a sense of responsibility and activism in these people, right? And also there's what we call the climate info box, because you understand that climate change is not a very prominent topic in this part of the world, right? People think it's abstract. So how do we get these people engaged? How do we get their commitment? We design what we call the climate info box. It's still under the program, the Climate Ambassadors Literacy Program. So what is the box? It's an innovative learning tool, that we use in making climate education engaging and enjoyable. In that box, you have books, you have flashcards, you have games, you have, activity guide and all that, to ensure that these students get interested in the subject of climate action, And of course, we know by targeting these schools and these students, we aim to create a ripple effect as educated students can influence their families and communities, to adopt sustainable practices, right? And, to further support our climate literacy goal, we also have textbooks, tailored for both junior and secondary schools, to provide comprehensive information on climate change and renewable energy, helping not just to deepen their understanding on the subject, but also trying to help inspire, action, right? So beyond just trying to promote literacy through this program, we also have programs like our Solar for Schools project, through which we try to provide renewable energy solutions to off-grid schools, enabling them to power the ICT resources. I give you, for instance, there was a time in one of the states in the Southeast, the government had announced that they had provided ICT resources for all the post-primary schools in the state. And so we went to investigate this claim, and we discovered that one major problem that hindered the full deployment of these ICT resources was power, because most schools are in off-grid communities, right? Even those that are connected to the grid, how many of them can be able to pay for electricity bill? So most times you find out that these resources lie fallow because they do not have what it takes to power them. So with this program, we try to provide renewable energy solutions for them, to improve access to technology. We understand that through this program also, we try to promote educational opportunities and demonstrate, most importantly, the practical benefits of renewable energy. So the beneficiaries will now experience the first-hand, have a first-hand experience of the reliability, the cleanliness, and the adequacy of renewable power supply. So of course, if these solutions can power ICT resources in school, they say, okay, it can actually power our homes, it can power the business of our parents, right? And so you find out that we get calls from some parents that tell you, my son came back and he told me this, my daughter came back and she told me this. How can we get this thing to work in our house? Now, how can we get it to work in my business? Can I use it to power my barber shop? Can I use it to power my hair styling shop and all that? So these are the kind of feedbacks that we get, And also we have what we call the Solar Skills Empowerment Program, which focuses on building skills for energy transition within communities, right? What we do is we train individuals on solar installation skills, and maintenance and all that, trying to create job opportunities and also promoting the adoption of renewable energy solutions at the grassroots level, right? So, and like I said earlier, most times we're very, very amazed at the feedbacks that we get. You know, some of these little things that we do in very disadvantaged and marginalized communities, you know, the ripple effect is most times amazing. You know, so we have identified schools as a strategic point of entry, you know, for fostering a deeper understanding of renewable energy benefits and encouraging active participation in sustainable energy transition in these communities that we work. So it's been working for us, right? It's been working for us because when these students are educated, when they are aware of the importance of renewable energy, right, you're sure that their parents and their communities around them is also aware and educated as well.
Thank you so much, Wilfred. I think you sort of answered the last questions I had in terms of the social impact of renewable energy projects on the communities you are engaged with, which is what you spoke to towards the end. So I think you've answered those questions actually, because I was going to ask about the social impact, but you've spoken on them extensively. So thank you so much. I can see you are very busy, and keep up the good work with all the initiatives and literacy programs that you're undertaking. So now we're going to take questions and answers from the audience. If there are any questions in the chat, or if you want to raise,
that if you upgrade it to business.
if you want to raise any questions, you can please indicate, and we would allow you speak. You can also put your questions in the chat box to be addressed by the speakers. While we're waiting for any questions, I think we would ask the speakers to sort of give some remarks on everything that has been enumerated on during the webinar. So we will start with Engineer Chibueze. Engineer Chibueze, please, if you are there, can you just provide your key remarks before we take up any further questions?
Okay, thank you very much. I'd say it's really been a good and nice conversation. For me, really, it still comes back to why are we here to play a role in energy transition? And I think that role we're playing is one that renewable energy affords us the opportunity to. So it's important that we actually, do our best to drive the adoption of renewable energy in our different ways, create awareness, and really ensure that people enjoy using renewable energy as they did enjoying their other sources of energy. So for me, really, as we're coming to a close, I think this is something I want to encourage all of us as we leave this conversation. Let it not end here. Let's really try our best to ensure that we remain ambassadors for the adoption of renewable energy, especially in communities where the impact will be felt the most.
Thank you so much, Engineer Chibueze. Mrs. Habiba Ali, can you just give us a few, if you are available, few closing remarks? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the opportunity, like I said, to be on this. Sorry, I'm also switching between events. But yeah, I think in the long run, access to renewable energies has actually been one thing that I have gladly, between my 2010 actual implementation of SUSE to now, been very happy to see the growth of, and there's so many people that are now in the space. I remember growing up and seeing people who repair radios as as a job. Now it is renewable energies. You're seeing people do that kind of thing for, like it's now a job. It's now a thing that people want to be part of, and installers are cropping up daily. I remember one time when we started Rian, and we were looking for people to just come and take trainings as installers, and it was quite difficult. But now people are, growing and wanting to learn, and in fact, to the point that we're even having fake installers. So we have moved.
Thank you. Like we have a NEPA 2 in the on-grid.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very good. Mrs. Amina Ibrahim, can you just give us your
Okay. Yeah, for me, that's a takeaway for me and from all the discussions that we've had here today is to promote the adoption of renewable energy. It's largely dependent on addressing key social issues, and that's where energy decision making should also focus. It's not just about the technology that will be deployed, but it's also about how do this technology have impact on these communities. So basically, how just is the transition to the process of renewable energy and the energy transition at large. Earlier on, I'd made a note of the upfront cost that engineer Chibueze made mention of, and this cost actually do create exclusion, especially when it's not affordable. So how do energy decisions begin to address this cost, like he actually questions, and then the need for creating proper frameworks that address this. For me, the framework would be proper recognition in terms of respect for these communities, taking responsibility, and proper remediation in terms of either mitigation or repair of any impacts that may result from the adoption of these renewable energies. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Amina. Mr. Wilfred, can you just give us your closing remarks?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All the speakers have spoken very well. Let me also say we must continue to work hard to, create that awareness. People are beginning to, it's not like it used to be like 10 years ago, right? There's this increased awareness on, renewable energy. We must continue to do more. And particularly, just like the last speaker said, how do we ensure that people in the remotest of the remote communities have access to these, right? Because one major hindrance to the adoption of renewable energy solutions is the initial pricing, right? So if we can have flexible payment models, models that are tailored around helping people to, pay instrumentally for these solutions, I think it's going to go a long way to ensure that everybody is included in this drive, to fully transition to renewable energy. Thank you so much once again for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have a few questions that I'm not sure who is addressed to. It says, how can your organization assist in the deployment of solar power systems within Ibadan community at a cheaper price? Maybe Engineer Chibueze, because I know you operate in the south area. It says Ibadan are seriously buying into it, but many still cannot afford it because of the cost. So how can your organization assist in deploying solar power systems within that community and maybe other communities as well?
Okay, thank you very much, Ivy. I think it would be good to get more information about the community and the challenge and opportunity there, but definitely something that we're happy to provide support for. And I know that there are also other people who can also be of support to them. Maybe if they look around locally within the state, there will be other developers who can also be of support. But definitely, I think one thing that is key is that we all need to be aware that the electricity we consume comes at a cost, whether it's from the grid, whether it's from a generator, whether it's from our solar energy solution, and we have to be mindful of that cost. So it's important for people to learn to consume what they can pay for. I know that tariffs have been going up lately, but that also speaks to the fact that even as consumers, we need to learn to be more efficient with our use of energy, so that even if tariffs go up, but we build a culture where we can actually be energy efficient, try to also conserve energy, and then be able to, maximize the utility of the energy we pay for.
Thank you, Engineer Chibueze. There's another question. I think I'll direct it to Mrs. Abiba Ali, especially because of her data-driven project that will soon be launched. It says, I have a community energy project in Kenya. My question is, what role does technology have to play in the provision of community energy projects, especially around data and impact measurements? Mrs. Habiba Ali, can you please?
For me, I would think that there's a lot that digitalization of our kind of projects will do. I mean, starting from execution, especially as we spoke on monitoring and evaluation. Imagine that before you even start your project, you do a baseline, you understand what the current situation is, and then you build a tool that will help you track, track progress and track, let's say, the impacts and all of that. At the end of it all, you're able to look back maybe like 2-3 years later and see how far have I come. What values has this added to the community? I'm currently doing my PhD research on the value of the impact of renewable energy funded projects in communities and what that has done to income generation and job creation. So imagine that I had, because one of the things I'm struggling currently with is the baseline data. What was it before I even did my research? And now, what is it now? So you can imagine what that will mean for you if you had a very proper digital tool already installed into your project. And then think about, for example, for us in renewable energy, solar home system deployment, sometimes you find you sell solar systems to people that's a pay-go option, that's pay-as-you-go option. If you do not have any data about that person and the person opts and goes, or you do not have a tool inside or a technology inside the solution that can actually shut it down when the person doesn't pay, you see you're losing money, right? So all of these things, unfortunately, associated. After Lumos came and did the big MTN thing, I think we're the next company that did pay-as-you-go very, very blindly. We lost over 600 systems of the 1,500 that we had put out to sell at that period. And anybody in the renewable energy space will tell you, and that was even when there were any OBS and all of that, will tell you that was a huge loss for I wouldn't lie, we're still paying that debt. So it's very, very key that in renewable energy projects, whether community-based or whatever, digitalization is good. I mean, look at what we're doing with the market map, like Evie mentioned earlier. It's not for the data to understand what the needs of the community are, if they even have any processing needs at all, if the women there are even willing to even work at all with us, or how would the banks know if there's actually a need for that solution? So if you look at it across board, from every angle, there's a huge thing, whether you're working in rural areas, urban areas, wherever, digitalization is really helping. And in fact, now one of my staff was telling me recently, or telling us, all of us recently, how AI is going to even do better than what we're currently doing. I'm still like, okay, that's another new level of learning for me. But Moses keeps saying, oh, you know what, if you had AI involved in this, that. And honestly, it's as interesting as it sounds, I think it's work, but I know that it's work that if I put my head down and study, then it's going to make my work better for me.
Thank you very much, Abiba. I think for us as well, data is really key. Even at Electricity Lawyer, we're developing a tool that can measure the impact of community benefits agreements. So people sign on community benefit agreements. How do you assess the level of effort and the level of impact that you have put into those agreements based on what is expected in terms of the output? So things like number of households electrified, or things like health facilities that have been put in place, even community benefit funds. Were those funds put in place? How much? What was the value? So we're also developing a tool that tracks the impact of community benefit agreements, or the implementation levels of community benefit agreements in communities. So data is really key, and it helps to also monitor, like Abiba said, monitoring and evaluation. It helps with evaluating the feasibility of your project and the impact. And it also even helps with opening up other opportunities. Like with this map that society is developing, it opens up opportunities for the banks to see, okay, where are the financial needs and how can we plug into it? So I think that is really key for renewable energy projects in general. So thank you very much, everyone. We're very happy to have all our discussants who really touched on key issues. Engineer Chibueze emphasized on productive use and awareness. Abiba emphasized on women inclusion and also the opportunities that can stem from various data-driven projects, like I just mentioned. Amina touched on communication strategies and community justice in driving renewable energy adoption, and of course, mechanisms for community engagement. And of course, Wilfred was big on climate literacy, which is also key because it's one thing to target the top of the community, but what of the grassroots, the children in those communities, educating them about the importance of climate change and even the need for renewable energy adoption is really key. So we want to thank all our discussants and our audience and participants for joining us today at this webinar. And we look forward to further engaging sessions in future. So thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you all.